In a development that could reshape the transatlantic economic landscape, President Trump is set to announce a framework trade agreement with the United Kingdom on Thursday. This deal isn't the final product yet, more of a roadmap than a ribbon-cutting ceremony, but it signals the first formal step toward rebuilding trade alliances that were shaken during Trump's first term and early in his second. And notably, it marks the first trade pact under his renewed presidency. The Wall Street Journal reports that this upcoming announcement is expected to focus on tariff adjustments and broader trade terms, setting the groundwork for deeper negotiations in the months to come. According to trade attorney Tim Brightbill, what's being announced is essentially a list of contentious issues both sides agree to tackle, among them tariff rates, non-tariff barriers, and digital trade regulations. None of these topics are easy, and all carry high political stakes both in the US and in the UK. This deal is notable for another reason. It comes just weeks after Trump's administration imposed a new 10% tariff on most goods imported from the UK, part of a sweeping baseline tariff that applies to nearly all countries, regardless of whether they are friend or foe. That's in addition to the 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum that have remained since March 12. Taken together, these levies put pressure on America's trading partners to come to the negotiating table, and Britain, in this case, appears willing to do so. There's also a geopolitical layer to this. With Brexit having separated the UK from the European Union's trade umbrella, the country is eager to prove it can sign independent trade agreements that benefit its economy. A deal with the United States, especially one that appears favorable, would be a big win for Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's government and could serve as a template for further bilateral agreements. But this announcement isn't happening in a vacuum. The Trump administration is actively engaged in a broader strategy to recalibrate America's trade relationships across the globe. Officials have confirmed ongoing talks with India and Japan, and Trump himself is preparing for a diplomatic trade mission to the Middle East. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has openly praised Indonesia's trade framework, hinting at interest in developing new partnerships in Southeast Asia. The administration's goal is clear: prioritize American manufacturing, reduce trade deficits, and force trading partners to open their markets wider to U.S. goods. The rhetoric has been aggressive, and so have the policies. While some tariffs have been paused for negotiation purposes, the 10% baseline remains in effect. Severe tariffs on Chinese imports, many of them consumer products like baby strollers, toys, and cribs, are also still active. These moves have had a measurable impact on prices at the retail level, though Trump has dismissed those concerns, famously joking that maybe the children will have 2 dolls instead of 30. Financial markets have responded cautiously to the uncertainty. While some investors welcome the possibility of new trade deals, the unpredictable nature of Trump's tariff threats and sudden announcements has triggered volatility. Market analysts point out that when trade policies shift without warning, companies are forced to delay decisions, reorganize supply chains, and hedge against unknowns. Still, the administration believes it holds the cards. Vice President J.D. Vance framed the current phase of negotiations as the early innings, emphasizing that the U.S. is engaging with virtually every major trading partner around the globe, whether ally or adversary. The goal? In his words, to achieve a little more fairness and what President Trump calls reciprocity. The message is straightforward: if you want access to the U.S. market, you'll need to make concessions. So what does this all mean beyond America and Britain? Let's start with the European Union. A US-UK agreement would shift dynamics in Brussels. If British firms gain preferential access to the American market while EU firms face higher tariffs, it could prompt European leaders to reconsider their own strategy. Could we see the EU return to trade talks with Washington? Possibly. But given the frosty relationships of recent years, it won't be easy. For Australia, the situation is both promising and precarious. On one hand, the US making deals with other liberal democracies like Britain and India could provide momentum for Australia to pursue deeper trade integration with the United States. Australia has long enjoyed strong ties with the US, and it could position itself as a reliable partner in a world where trade alliances are increasingly transactional. On the other hand, the re-emergence of tariffs as a negotiating tool raises concerns. Australia, like many nations, has benefited from relatively free access to the US market for key exports. But that access might no longer be guaranteed. The Trump administration has made clear that loyalty alone doesn't equal favorable trade terms. Every relationship is being reviewed through a new lens, one focused on perceived fairness and economic advantage to America. This deal with Britain, then, is more than just a bilateral agreement. It's a statement of direction, a signal that the US is reshaping the rules of trade, prioritizing national interest, and using tariffs not as a last resort, but as a standard opening move. Whether that approach leads to stronger domestic industries or global friction remains to be seen. But for now, one thing is certain: the world's major economies are watching and recalibrating.